It is great to see you guys. Today we begin a brand new series called God Is. And the beautiful part of this is the more we begin to understand who God is, the more we begin to understand who we are. You see, it's in the wake of His divine creative work that we find our identity. In the wake of God's divine creative work that we begin to define our identity, to find it. Who we are is so woven in intrinsically into the nature of God. So the more we discover Him, the more we discover who we are, our purpose, those deeper metaphysical questions, we wrestle through those in the wake of God's grace and glory. John 18:11 is going to be one of our primary texts. We'll look at two scriptures. That's the first one this morning. It's this. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" Now, this text is so easily overlooked because we don't really pay attention to the greater story. We look at the greater story, but we don't get what's really happening and why this text is important. So let me see if I can help you. Imagine in your mind that you could go back to the garden with Jesus prior to His arrest, prior to the cross. Now let me paint this picture. This is a garden. It's probably becoming beautiful as it's spring. Usually a garden is a place of peace. Even in my mind, imagine a beautiful garden. I can see it in my mind, a place that's silent. The wind maybe blowing through, that's it, but no extra noise. But maybe in the back distance of the garden, as we begin to walk up on Jesus, you can hear Him crying. Now, I don't know about you, if you've ever been through a season where it's been really, really tough, or where you maybe had some physical sicknesses, battled with something, where you're just really crying out to God, "God, please let this cup pass from me," that type of prayer, where you're begging God to change the outcome of a circumstance. And as we go back to the story, we walk up on Jesus in this moment, this garden, a place that's supposed to be full of peace, a place to relax. And Christ is crying out to God. He's in tears. He weeps. He asks that there may be a different direction, but promises to be faithful to the plan. And then as we look on Christ, we can hear in the distance the noise of people coming down the trail. And in my mind's eye, in my romantic literary way, I can look over and I see the soldiers coming down. It's lanterns, torches, weapons. And as they march onto the scene, I can feel the intensity in this place that is supposed to be pristine and calm and quiet, this beautiful garden. And now all of a sudden, these two groups of people are about to come together. But you see, it's not just these groups of people that are coming together. It's the enemy in his way and all of this millions of other created things that are watching in on this event. And it's Jesus and his disciples and all of heaven. It's like a whole army standing on this side, and in this quiet little garden, these two groups are about to collide in an event that all of humanity is going to hear about later on, but all of heaven is watching. All of heaven is watching. I wonder what it would be like to be in heaven with the angels as they peer in on this very temporal earth at this moment, the epicenter of humanity. As they gaze in and they look at this, maybe they can see what we can't see as these two groups come together in the moment. And then Peter, I see this kind of like an episode of Lord of the Rings, like the armies are lined up and ready to go into battle. And then Peter is standing there looking, wanting to stand for his Savior. And he pulls out his sword and he marches in as they move in on Jesus. And he swings at Malchus, hits him on the side of his face and cuts off his ear. I only could imagine what was going through Peter's mind. Peter may be thinking, this is it. This is the moment, this is the time when it all goes down. And he's feeling bold and brave, like he's the one to charge in first and go, "For me, for the glory of Jesus, I will give it all, I'll give my life." And he runs in. And then Jesus responds in a really interesting way. Jesus says to Peter, "Put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" Now, from Peter's perspective, he thinks he's fighting with the right team. He thinks he's doing the right thing. From Peter's perspective, from his mind's eye, he thinks he's on the right team. He thinks he's on the right side. But Jesus says no. The beginning of Understanding God, this new series that we're going into, we're going to begin to understand who we are, and we understand who we are by first admitting that we aren't God. The beginning of understanding who God is, it starts, the beginning of this journey begins with us admitting that we are not God. That our perspective is so finite, so limited, it is so small. You were born probably in America, speaking the English language. You don't even really understand what it's like to be a human on the other side of the world for most of you. For most of you, you don't understand what it's like to be born in a different era, time. All you have is your very limited perspective. And then God, the creator of the universe, doesn't look just through your eyes. He can step way above it and look at all of human history and all the pieces of the puzzle. He sees who you are and your future. He knows your strengths. He knows your weaknesses. And he makes decisions based on such a more grand perspective than you, who is oh so finite and small. Finite and small. The beginning of understanding God is by admitting that you aren't one. The beginning of understanding God is admitting that you aren't one. I go back into the garden in my mind's eye. Peter probably a little ashamed and embarrassed of what just happened, thinking he was doing the right thing, acting in a way that he perceived to be correct, and then corrected by Jesus, not just in front of those people, but in front of all of heaven. I can see in my mind's eye the followers of Jesus scurry away into the shadows, overwhelmed by fear and possibly confusion. The greatest barrier that we have to peace is trust. The greatest obstacle to trust is pride. It's the belief that we know what is best for us. And I hear this as a pastor, and I get it. Even as a pastor, I'm an overthinker. This is probably why I'm not that great of a counselor, because they're talking and my mind's just going a million miles an hour. But most of the time when people pray, they pray for God to let their will be done. I want more power. I want more influence. I want to change jobs. God, help me to be healthier. And we always pray from our perspective. And what we're really doing is we're saying, God, from my perspective, I ask that my will be approved by you and done. That's the way most of us really pray. I ask that my will would be approved by you and done. And then when it doesn't happen the way we like, we get mad at God for it. C.S. Lewis talks about pride. I love this. I love Lewis. I quote him a lot. And that's a subtle little hint that's not subtle this morning. You need to read more Lewis. He's a good dude, and he's smarty pants guy. I like him. Some of the best authors are the dead ones. Listen to me. As a pastor, I'm telling you, you need to read dead authors. They're good. They're smart. It may take a while to work through it, but it's good stuff. Lewis says it like this: there is one vice of which no man in the world is free, which everyone in the world loathes when he sees in someone else. The essential vice, the utmost evil, is pride. It's the idea that I know what's best and everybody needs to bow to my perspective. I'm right. You see this in little ways with people that are going, oh, the Bible's antiquated. What we know now supersedes the time-transcendent truths of old. Unchastity, anger, greed, Lewis goes on, are all that, unchastity, anger, greed, drunkenness, and all that are mere flea bites in comparison. It was through pride that the devil became the devil. Pride leads to every other vice. It is the complete anti-God state of mind. If you want to find out how proud you are, the easiest way is to ask yourself, how much do I dislike it when other people snub me, refuse to take notice of me, or shove an oar in, meaning like poke at me? or patronize me or show off. The point is that each person's pride is in competition with everyone else's pride. It is the lie that we know what's best. And the problem with this is when we act as if we believe that we know what's best, our security, our peace is woven into our finite perspectives. And when things don't work out our way, we are broken, and it all hinges on your lack of trust in the divine perspective. Let me make this even more pointed. John Piper takes the idea even further. I'm going to continue to extrapolate this. John Piper says, outside this promise of God's all-encompassing future grace. So Piper is saying outside of the greater trust of God, outside of God's greater trust of God, we find these things. There are straw houses of drugs to make us feel good, pornography, dozens of futile diversions. There are slat walls of tin roofs of fragile investment strategies, fleeting insurance coverage that never really works out, trivial retirement plans that never seem to come completely. There are cardboard fortifications of deadbolt locks, alarm systems, anti-ballistic missiles, and they are all outside of putting our primary trust in God. Our primary trust in God. The beginning of understanding God is admitting that you aren't one. The beginning of understanding God is admitting that you aren't one. We are going to be in Isaiah 40 for the next couple of months, and we are going to look back in time to help us understand how we should be even now and for the future. Isaiah 41 says this, "Comfort, comfort my people, says your God." That's it. That's our text this morning, just that. Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Now, it's easy a lot of times in the Bible for us to read past things quickly because we don't take the time to do the literary work. What is historically happening? Who is he talking to? Why is he saying this to them? What was happening in history at this point? One of the commentators said it really well. It says, but by Isaiah's time, the descendants, talking about this intro verse, but by Isaiah's time, the descendants of Abraham and many members of the dynasty of David no longer trusted. Now listen really close to this. This is good. They no longer trusted the promises of God. They instead aligned themselves with the promises and the fears of false world, false idols, walls. My trust isn't in God. It's in me building up my own securities and begging God to make my securities stronger, which are so temporal and small anyways. And so the primary call, comfort, comfort my people, says your God. He looks out at his people and he says, put your trust not in what you can acquire or build or make. Don't put your trust in your health and your influence and your knowledge. Put your greatest, deepest trust in me. In me. I find as an observer of life, that we have a tendency as humans to constantly pursue the things that look like they will feel the best for the moment. Let me give you some examples. My children, when they were small, I remember at one point we had a conversation. One of my kids, when they were really little, said, "Daddy, I want ice cream for every meal." Love it. And now as an adult, I look at my child and I have enough foreknowledge, I have enough greater understanding of how the human body works and how they develop that I can look at my kids when they were really little and go, no. With the love of Jesus and from your dad, absolutely not. And then they do something kind of like this. "You're so mean." I say, "Eat your broccoli." "It's so gross. Why do you make me do things like that? I don't like broccoli. I don't want to eat it. It doesn't taste good. I don't like it." "It's good for you. Eat it." But if you're a little kid and all you have is a couple of years perspective, or if you're an adult and all you have is 70 years perspective of all of history, it's easy for us to look at God and go, "Why are you so mean? Why do you keep me from these things?" Well, let's move forward a little bit in life. As my kids get a little bit older, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, now the complaints, they begin to understand that you can't have ice cream at every meal. They've had enough life sciences now to know about nutrients. They have a little greater understanding. But they'll say things like this: Dad, school is boring. I don't want to go to school anymore. And as a dad, I go, I don't care. I love you, and I don't care that you think it's boring. It's good for you. You need to do it. Now, from a little kid's perspective, he doesn't have a point. If I drop out of school in 5th grade, my future might be damaged just a little bit. Right? But if all you have is 7, 8, 9, 10 years perspective of life, it's really easy to think, my parents are so mean that they make me do this thing that's no fun over and over and over again. And the reason it feels awful is because you don't understand. You don't understand. Let's fast forward a little bit further. There was this young family about 10 years ago. Wonderful, awesome family that I love. They were called the Colaws. Are called the Colaws. That's supposed to be funny. It was funny to me, at least. And the Colaws, being a young couple, finally able to making it in life a little bit, going out, we wanted to build a home, okay? And we were going to work through one of those building companies. And it's interesting because when you meet with a realtor, at least years ago it was this way, when I met with a realtor, you go, this is my price range, which I think I can afford. If this is the lowest end and this is the highest end of the price range, realtors, the realtor that we were working with all those years ago, always had us look at houses that were right here price range-wise. You ever notice that? Right here, right just at the very top or a little above what we really could afford. And then what happens is this young Kolaw family, Leslie and I, we walk in to a house, a model home. We walk into it and we go, whoa, this is awesome. Do you really think we can afford it? And the realtor goes, yeah, you can do this. Like he really knew. And so standing there as a young couple, I'm going, all right, we got to do this. This is going to be awesome. And my wife's going, oh, I love this. And I'm going, I love it too. It would be so cool to get to live here. And you start imagining where things would go and walking around the house. You know, we could maybe put, at that point, we just had one child, I think. 2. The second one was just born, I think, at that point. And so at that spot in life, we were right around that area. We're going, man, we could put kids here. We could set up stuff over here. It would be so fun. We're going to love this. And we thought we were buying a beautiful home for us to relax in. But we weren't buying a home. We were buying a financial prison. We weren't buying a home. We were buying a financial prison. But we were too young and had too little insight to understand it. We weren't shopping in our means. We were buying something that was going to restrict us and actually be harder on us and hurt us. And now looking back, I remember praying, God, I would love for this to happen. Driving away from home, oh Lord, if this is your will for me to get this house, that'd be awesome, God. And so I really pray that it would happen. God, please let me get this house. This would be so cool. And I remember driving by it. I remember even when we started building it, like walking the property, praying for this. And if older Mike could go back to younger Mike, I wish I could sit me down and go, don't do it. That's stupid. I shouldn't say stupid in church. There's kids in here. I'm sorry. My wife will get me in trouble. I'll be grounded tonight. Right? I'll get in trouble. Right? So, but that's what happens, man. Finite, limited, small perspective Mike looks at this situation and I'm frustrated and I'm mad at God or I'm happy with what I get, but we don't understand it from our small little perspective. The first step to really beginning to understand God is admitting that you aren't one. It's admitting that you aren't one. It's trusting that His ways are bigger than yours. It's trusting that the commands even found in Scripture that are ancient are superior to even modern ideas that really aren't modern at all. Everything new that's happening in culture has happened over and over again. How many times, I don't know how many people here like to read. I like to read a lot. And I read about these new cultural accepted ideas or thoughts. None of this is new. None of this is new. I can't help but read through stuff on Facebook and think, people, read a book. None of this is new. Our ideas aren't modern. They're ancient, and they didn't work before. And they didn't work over and over again in culture and in history. But yet we have to repeat it because we're ignorant and we think that our small, little, finite, tiny perspective is right. The beginning of understanding God is admitting that you aren't one. The beginning of understanding God is admitting that you aren't one. You aren't one. Isaiah, according to Jewish tradition, was the son of Amos, Isaiah 1:1, and Amos was the brother of Amaziah, king of Judah. Isaiah, according to tradition, was of the royal family. Okay, so now think about this. This is so important from a biblical perspective. Isaiah could see what others could not. So Isaiah is looking at all of these people And he's gazing across all the things that they're investing their time, energy, money, resources, everything that they're building with their own hands. And God gives Isaiah the ability to step above it and see that all of these things are futile. They don't really work. They never really have. I'm going to invite Jason to come up. The real question then this morning is, how do we begin to rise above the things that the world tells us are our securities? How do we begin to put our trust and peace in something that is time transcendent, not temporal, like temporary? How do we rise above this? How do we begin to find a security that is greater than an insurance policy? How do we begin to find an identity that is deeper than being in shape? How do we begin, like in the gym? How do we begin to find a peace that's greater than even health or wealth or prosperity? How do we find that? That's what this whole series is about. I would love to preach for another 15 hours and finish working through Isaiah 40, but I can't this morning. You're going to have to come back. But I'm telling you, man, this ancient book is going to speak powerful life into your future if you let it. And it begins by admitting, I am not a God and my perspective is oh so limited. Back to Peter. In the garden, the army is building up, even the stuff we can't see, right? Like all of heaven. The metaphysical is building up. The tension is building up. And the disciples are moving in, and we see the enemy marching in for this arrest of Jesus, all on this one individual, the epicenter of all humanity. This one country boy changed everything. Love country boys. And as these two armies begin to merge together and collide, I can only imagine if Peter was God, if Peter, from his limited perspective, could change things through time and make adjustments, I bet you what Peter would have chosen is, you know what, let's have like an M1 tank roll out with the disciples. You want to arrest Jesus? Take him now. I mean, if Peter had his way, like they would have flown in and the seals would have dropped out and dropped down and be like, I dare you, touch him. I mean, if Peter had his way, I mean, he would have come down, he would have waged war, I mean, through time and space, found the best tools and stood for Jesus. But even still, even the man who walked with Jesus didn't get it. How arrogant of us to pray and act as if we do. Jesus knows the kind of you that might be produced if you really did become super rich. It may be fun for now to eat ice cream for every meal, but it may damage you for forever. Jesus knows the kind of you that might be produced if you really did gain a whole bunch more power and influence at work. Will it really make you into a kind of person that honors God for forever? Jesus knows the kind of you that might be produced if you didn't have that thorn in your side that keeps you humble. Jesus knows the kind of you that might be produced. And we, like children, beg God for ice cream for every meal. Jesus gets down and he says, you don't get this. Trust me. Broccoli's gross, but you need it. You need maybe to not be more wealthy. You need maybe to be humbled. You need maybe to have your forever created right. Your temporary may need to be a little difficult. And then we get so mad at God because yet again we don't trust. We pray as if we are God, wanting Him to support our will. It's the very thing that made the devil the devil. The best gift that you could give Jesus this Easter, the best gift that you could give yourself this Easter is admitting, I am not God. I don't understand. And I'm going to choose to trust the one who does. I'm going to choose it. Even if I don't feel it yet, I'm going to choose it. Even if it doesn't look good, I'm going to choose it. The beginning of understanding God is admitting you aren't one. The beginning of understanding God is admitting you aren't one. No doctor will stop you from dying. No investment strategy is stronger than a temporary economy. No country has stayed superior in military, economy, or morality forever. No drug permanently heals your body. No exercise program will keep you at 20 years old for forever. Your peace is only as strong as what you are most proud of. And I am telling you, trust the time-transcendent truths of Jesus. Jesus is the only peace that broke through even death. I'm going to close with Dr. John Piper's statement again. Outside this promise of all-encompassing future grace, so outside, again, I got to paint this picture, outside of trusting God, outside of trusting God and putting your peace in your trust of God, outside of that, Dr. Piper says, outside this promise of God's all-encompassing future grace, there are straw houses of drugs, pornography, dozens of futile diversions. There are slat walls of tin roofs, fragile investment strategies, and fleeting insurance coverage that never really covers and doesn't really work like it's supposed to. There are trivial retirement plans that never seem to come just right. There are cardboard fortifications, deadbolt locks, alarm systems, anti-ballistic missiles. And if our trust is in them, it is still outside of where it's supposed to be. The beginning of understanding God is beginning by admitting that you aren't one. I promise that as you let go of these sandcastles of your security that are temporary, like your youth, your looks, your beauty, your stuff, your career, your investments, your retirement plans, these sandcastles that you're constantly trying to continue to build up and work on it, and it washes away, and you got to build it back up, and you work on it again, and constantly exhausted trying to maintain this thing. I'm telling you, I promise you, if you go, God, I trust you. My deepest trust in my heart is you. I'm still going to work hard. I'm still going to give my all. But my work ethic is not because my identity is in it. My work ethic is because I'm faithful to the one I love. And that's my heart. I promise a peace will wash over you like you've never had before. Never had before. So what does this look like? How do we build this? How do we wrestle through it? We'll start that next week.